So what is law school like? What is your day-to-day world going to be once you get there? You know, in undergrad, we're accustomed to people lecturing to us in a lot of our classes. And in law school, you're going to find that you don't really get lectured to very often. Of course, some professors will do it, but the methodology is a bit different. You'll be asked for homework the majority of the time to what's called brief cases, which means reading the case and outlining a few things. What are the facts of the case? What was the procedure that was followed for either the civil or criminal procedure? And then you'll also be asked not only what was the holding, but what was the reasoning behind the holding. And you'll read the dissenting judges as well, why they disagreed with the majority opinion. So all of this is to get you to be able to analyze the reasoning such that if you were out there practicing as a lawyer, you'd be able to apply that same reasoning to a different set of facts. Because of course, this is the real world. No same set of facts comes up a second time, right? So you'll be briefing these cases, that'll be your homework. And then the professor might employ what's called the Socratic method. And the Socratic method is much feared by many prospective law students. And there's good reasons for that. You may be called upon to stand in front of the class, or perhaps you're sitting, but either way, you're kind of in the hot seat for that day. And a lot of times a professor will choose one person at random and call on that person to answer all of the questions for the entire class that day. This can be a little bit intimidating, especially if you haven't done your reading for that day. But even if you have, I mean, you're being asked to explain why the judge why the judge reasoned in the way he or she did, and then how you would apply that reasoning to a different set of facts. And the interesting thing about the Socratic method is the person who's in the hot seat is just, sweating and nervous the entire time, but the rest of the class, they're really sitting thinking, oh gosh, how would I answer that question if I were in her shoes? And it makes for a very interesting learning environment, and people find that they learn well through this method, and that's why it continues. The law teaching has been like this for decades, and it continues into today because it's a useful approach. You'll often hear first-year law students referred to as 1Ls, so it's the number 1 and L, letter L. And we want to talk about what the typical first-year curriculum looks like. Pretty much across the board, you're going to be taking the same classes in your first year, no matter where you go to law school. There will be slight variations, but pretty much you're going to be required to take a few things: property law, civil procedure, contracts, torts, perhaps criminal law, and usually constitutional law. There'll also typically be a legal writing class that you may take all year, possibly. So what are each of these? Well, I mean, I think that constitutional law is pretty straightforward, criminal law as well. Property is pretty interesting. You'll learn a whole lot of terminology that you may or may not remember after you've taken the bar. And civil procedure, that tells you how to bring a case to court, the procedure that's required. Again, a lot of rules to learn, but it can be kind of interesting, believe it or not. And you'll take contracts, find out what is a valid contract, what is not. And torts are the types of situations where someone brings a civil suit against another person or against a company. If you think about, let's say you're walking to the subway today and it was raining, you got pushed aside by someone who was eager to catch the train, and let's say you fell down the stairs. Well, you might sue that person who shoved you, right? Because that person should probably be sued. And then you might sue the transit authority for not having a better staircase or whatever. I had a law professor who just said, sue them all. That was his theory on torts. So you'll learn when to bring those suits and when you can expect to win such a suit. So expect your first year to be rather predictable in terms of what classes you're going to take. But then in your second and third year, you'll have a lot more freedom. You'll get to take some elective classes. You may have a few required classes, like some law schools require tax law, some require evidence, but the majority of the time you'll be able to start working in the field that you want to specialize in. So a lot of people find that the second and third year are a little more relaxed than the first year. Well, I shouldn't say that. The third year might be a little bit more relaxed. People work pretty hard in second year as well. But this is also a time for you to get involved in other activities at the school. At the end of your first year, you'll have the opportunity to write on to law review. You'll submit a brief, and if you're accepted, then you'll get to participate in that law school's legal journal. A lot of these law reviews are incredibly prestigious, and it can be quite an honor to be accepted onto law review. Many schools have multiple journals. Particularly, those journals tend to follow that school's area of specialization. So again, this is another way to kind of get involved prior to graduating, so that when you graduate, you've already opened up some doors for yourself in terms of your career opportunities. You might also want to participate in moot court. People who intend to become trial lawyers like to practice what it's like to actually make your arguments in front of a judge. And so that can kind of be the time to pull out your theatrics, and people tend to have a really good time in moot court. So that wraps up a little bit what you can expect to experience when you're in law school. But what I'd like to talk to you now about is what your law school application will consist of, and what are the most important elements of that law school application. So in your law school application, of course, you're going to be judged on your undergraduate GPA and your LSAT score. But as you know, you're also going to be required to submit a personal statement. You will also have to submit your resume. So you'll be judged on what work experience you have. So it's important to law school admissions officers that they be attracting people who have real-world experience and or an interesting or diverse undergraduate background. They're going to be looking at the courses you took in undergrad. And did you challenge yourself? Did you take upper-level classes that forced you to really think, right? Because those are the types of people that they want to draw to their school. Of course, you're going to have to submit letters of recommendation. And it's good to remember that if you're still in undergraduate school, to start talking to your professors now about your plans to apply to law school, why it's important to you, and kind of, without being cheesy about it, start to develop that relationship with those professors so that when you do ask for that letter, they know who you are and they know why they want to write a great letter for you. Of course, you may have the opportunity to talk about other things such as diversity, why you would make a diverse candidate. And for those of you women out there, though it used to be a little bit anomalous that women would apply to law school, not at all the case anymore. The statistics come out at about 50-50 in terms of law school applicants. So that doesn't necessarily make you diverse. It could make you diverse if you say why the experience of being a woman influences your ability to succeed as a legal practitioner, et cetera, et cetera. You could certainly use that in a diversity statement. But just to let you know, this is not necessarily always about your ethnicity or your cultural heritage. It can also be simply about your diverse life experiences. I mean, let's say when you were 12, your parents took you on a trip around the world. I have friends of the family who did that with their 12-year-old, and he consequently, I mean, his entire life changed because of that. So even if you don't have parents who took you on a trip around the world, you still may have interesting life experiences that you can bring out in your personal statement.